Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My guest today is Jennifer Coffindaffer, who has been a special agent with the FBI for 26 years. Today with Jennifer, we'll talk about gun violence in the United States, which is a pretty big problem. And when we talk about the United States, sooner or later, this discussion comes up. Thanks for your time, Jennifer. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, as I mentioned, you have been with the FBI for 26 years. You're an expert in this topic we're going to cover today. But would you like to tell us something to tell my viewers who you are and whatever you want to say about your background?
Oh, sure. So actually, I have over 28 years in federal law enforcement. I was a special agent with the Office of Inspector General for about 3 years and a special agent with the FBI for over 25 years. My areas of specialty were investigations involving violent crime, gangs, and cartels, organized crime. And I was also on the Dallas SWAT team, the Houston SWAT team, and the San Juan SWAT team. In addition, now I'm an expert witness since my retirement. I work for Eagle, which is basically a lot of FBI agents that now provide witness or expert witness work. In other words, we review cases and then make our opinion on whether things were done correctly or incorrectly, and then we testify in court about that. I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel called Break the Case with Jen Coffindaffer, and hope your viewers can check it out. I talk about all sorts of true crime stories, if you will, actual cases, and we break them down with different guests. And then finally, I am the law and justice contributor for News Nation. I hope you guys have a chance to catch it. It's 3:07 on your cable channel throughout the United States. It's nationwide. And I usually am on the evening programs with either Elizabeth Vargas or Chris Cuomo.
Well, and I would add that I usually recommend my viewers to subscribe to this channel, but of course, in this case, I'm recommending everybody to subscribe to your channel as well. I'm going to leave the link to the channel in the description of this video, so that for everybody who sees this video, it's going to be very easy to find. Oh, well, let me ask you something very basic to start. So gun violence seems to be a unique case in the United States. Like when a lot of people, for instance, I love the United States. I come to America every summer vacationing, to vacation there. And a lot of people tell me, aren't you scared of random shootings? Actually, I answer, no, I'm not, because, you know, a car accident is still much more likely. But how come the gun violence is such a big problem in the US? Because it is a unique case worldwide.
Yes, I think you're right. And the reason it exists and the reason it's a chronic problem is because since the beginning of our system in the United States, our government is really based on, in part, the right to bear arms. It's our Second Amendment right. And of course, that was because, you know, we separated from England. And after that, you know, people wanted to be able to have the right to bear arms so that if Her Majesty's people came to their door, they would be able to protect themselves. And that is a right that has never waned. And moreover, it also, unfortunately, the criminal element utilizes guns, and they're very readily available. As I always tell everyone, the horse done left the barn. In other words, for 2 centuries, guns have been a huge part of our culture, and it's not going to end.
Well, you mentioned that it's very easy to buy guns in America. And I made a joke last summer because I was vacationing in Miami and I had to go buy medicines. And it was a disaster because I needed prescriptions. They wanted my passport. It took me forever. So I thought to myself, is in this country easier to buy a gun rather than medicines? So let me recap what I'm saying. How easy it is to buy guns, fire guns in the United States?
It's so easy. You can buy them online. You can go to really a gun show and buy guns. It's very easy. And then obviously, street criminals, they buy them amongst each other. Guns are prevalent here. I would say that in certain states within the United States, like Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, there's, you know, over around a dozen states that are what we call constitutional carry states, which means you don't even have to have a license to carry a gun at all. Anyone can carry it by their Second Amendment right. Then there are other states that you can carry a concealed weapon, but you have to go through classes. And then there are some states, very few, New York, California, some of the other eastern states that require very strict gun ownership. So it's just very easy to buy a gun.
Well, you also mentioned the black market, like gangsters selling guns to each other. But how big is this phenomenon? Because of course, I cannot imagine gangsters going to a shop and legally buying firearms. Of course, they have to go to the black market, coming from, I don't know, from foreign states, from elsewhere. How big is this phenomenon?
Well, it's really not even as complicated as all of that. I mean, by law, you're supposed to have a license to deal firearms, and you have to have this licensing to open up a shop and to basically be able to distribute. But that doesn't mean that from one person to another, you can't sell a gun, because you can. And that's what people do. And they trade guns, drugs for guns. They can do a particular deed and get a gun. So guns are it's wide open in terms of exchanging firearms for money and services on the streets in the criminal element.
Well, we touched many points already because we mentioned the street gangs, but of course, we also have mobs. We have home violence, like people going berserk and killing their family. And we have the so-called white terrorism. And we also have random shooters, such as what happened in Las Vegas, for instance, or Columbine. Which one of this is the biggest problem, or are they all the same?
Well, no, I don't think they're all the same. I think that a lot of the gun violence situation is confused when it comes to statistics, and this is why. There can be a gun incident in a school, and no matter what that incident was, it goes down as a shooting. So, in other words, somebody could bring a gun and accidentally shoot it, and somebody ends up dying. And that's a lot different from Columbine, as you mentioned, or one of the other instances like the Crumbly, who just, was convicted for killing four, that purposefully brought his firearm in, opened fire on his classmates, right? So there's two differences. So the statistics are a little warped and confusing. But certainly, I think the biggest issue with gun violence in our country is probably the gang issue, the gang cartel drug issue. It's a huge situation. And because our borders are now porous, meaning people are just flooding in that are unvetted, that are cartel members and gang members and of the criminal element. Now we have a whole new component. So I would say amongst the cartel slash gang members, that is our biggest threat in terms of gun violence.
Well, we also already mentioned Columbine, and Columbine started school shootings. Probably they existed even before, but they were not as uh, popular, likely, as today. And we also have other cases, Uvalde being another one. So, do you think that teachers should carry guns, or would that make it even worse because we can have friendly fires in school as well? What do you think?
I'm glad you brought that up, because in Tennessee recently, it was just approved by their legislature to allow teachers to carry firearms. And this is the situation. As long as those teachers get the requisite training they need, as long as they have to re-qualify, in other words, they have to take marksmanship courses and be able to qualify with a certain score, as long as they understand how to manipulate them and understand gun safety, I think it's a good thing. I know many will disagree with me because now they'll say, well, now you've put a gun where children can get to it. But again, this is where gun safety has to be followed. And what that means to me is it has to be on that teacher's person. It can't be locked in their drawer because somebody could pick it open. It could be in a gun safe that's in that room. That would be no problem because those are nearly impenetrable as long as it's bolted into the ground or into a fixed location where they couldn't take it. So I'm very much for properly trained teachers to be able to carry, because I'll tell you what, and I tell everyone this in my self-defense classes, there is no way the FBI, the ATF, or any law enforcement officer is going to be there. It's going to be something that happens in seconds, and you're going to need to be able to react. It's the same in this situation. If somebody comes in shooting, by the time officials respond, it's way too late.
Well, some shootings like Columbine or Las Vegas are just random, but some of them are driven by hate and intolerance. One example being probably the shooting in Orlando in 2016. We're not exactly sure what happened there, what was the reason why that happened, but hate can be an explanation. And hate was surely an explanation in El Paso in 2019. What is the role of social media here? Because social media are making the community, our society, more intolerant and more polarized. Do you think that social media are making things worse?
I think social media is making everything worse. Now, I understand I'm a big part of it. I have a very strong Twitter following at Coffindaffer FBI. If any of you are on Twitter X and follow true crime, and then obviously you and I both have YouTube channels, so we're sort of part of the mix. But you hope for our parts that we're part of education, we're part of advocacy, we're part of trying to make things better, not worse. Unfortunately, that's not the case with a lot of the channels and with a lot of social media. I think it's really a bad thing when you look at kids nowadays, teenagers. They are absolutely glued to their phone. The phones have made us almost glued to them as adults, right? We use them for directions. I mean, if I leave the house without my phone and I'm going to someplace I don't know how to get there, because we rely on our phone. Also, just communication with individuals speaking. But social media has such a strong influence on our young and on our kids, and also a desensitizing mechanism, because unfortunately they see murders all the time on social media. Their games are really about killing others, and it's very realistic. The pictures, the photos used look just like people. And so it's very concerning.
Well, we have another interesting phenomenon in the United States that is serial killers. And are the two phenomena connected? Because what I'm thinking of here is that a lot of serial killers actually use firearms. The first examples that come to my mind would be the DC Sniper, but also Andrew Cunanan. And also the DC Sniper sparked a lot of copycats. So are the two phenomena linked in your opinion? Does easy access to firearms create more serial killers?
I don't think they're linked at all, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of serial killers are motivated by sex, by a sexual fantasy and overcoming the person in a passionate and sexual way. And actually, the most gratifying way to accomplish that a lot of times is with their bare hands or with a knife. So I would say the true serial killers, or with a blunt force object, Bundy did everything, one of the most prolific. Jeffrey Dahmer killed people in every manner. But most serial killers, not all, but most, really desire that close, passionate, angry, anger filled, sex rage filled type of killing. So, although some, obviously, you named two examples there, three examples. Berkowitz was another one. He preferred to go up and just shoot his victims. But I think they're not related. I can tell you Dennis Rader, who was the BTK killer in Wichita, Kansas, where I grew up and when I grew up, although he preferred to use his hands or to suffocate, to strangle, he did not want a messy environment. And he wanted everything very clean. So, in other words, they're two separate issues as to what kind of weapon they use to kill.
Well, that's definitely a very good point. Of course, we also have a lot of serial killers using knives or other types of weapons. So your point definitely makes sense. But is easy access to firearms making people want to buy more? For instance, if I were living in the States, probably would want to buy one to protect myself. So it's like this system escalating itself instead of de-escalating.
Oh, it's definitely escalating from the standpoint of bad guys have guns, so good guys want guns. And for people like myself, who is a firearms instructor currently in the civilian population, uh, definitely you want people, at least I do. My daughter's trained, my son's trained, I'm trained, my husband's trained. I want everyone trained how to use a weapon in a self-defense situation. In other words, somebody breaks in the house or they're accosted. Um, but it's so important because you can't bring a knife to a gunfight or pepper spray to a gunfight, right? In other words, that unfortunately, because so many bad people that are robbers, that are gangsters, they come with guns. They don't come with knives. Remember, they're not motivated by the passion of killing necessarily. They're motivated because of either greed or anger, retribution, sport, and they prefer to use guns. That's a sign of money, it's a sign of clout, and so that's what they use.
Well, what would you answer to people saying that they don't want to come to the States because of the fear of ending up in a shooting?
Well, it's actually not it's not an issue, and I know it might seem like it's an issue because it's an issue in the media. In other words, when something bad happens, the media is of course on it, and that's what everybody sees internationally. But the fact of the matter is, you could go to probably, I don't know the exact statistic, but probably something like 99% of the United States and not be in danger. But if you go into certain areas of cities like Los Angeles, like Philadelphia, New York, different, Miami is another big one. If you go into those areas that are gang controlled, where drug distribution is happening every minute of every day, and you're in turf and you're wearing the wrong color, or you're just there passing through and gang members get in a fight and a stray bullet hits you, it's dangerous. But typically speaking, no. Even when you're talking about the random shootings, for instance, individuals who do go into a restaurant or a church and commit a random shooting, it's so statistically improbable that you would ever be a victim. Now, if you ask me about a car wreck, that's when it gets serious. That's when your stats would go up. But no, the United States is really very, very safe.
Of course, it's not a war zone. Okay. I also think that people are exaggerating. I like coming to the United States, and I never for a second thought about ending up in a shooting. Why is it so difficult to address this problem? Because in Europe, we have the impression that Americans are so in love with their guns as they are with their cars, for instance.
I love this question. I think many Americans are. I mean, many Americans are raised with guns, particularly if you grew up on a farm, if you grew up in the country. Everybody has a gun. Everyone has a long gun, a shotgun, a rifle. People hunt. And then whenever that happens, you become accustomed to guns, and people have guns to shoot for sport. In other words, clay shooting, which are where they, trap and skeet, where they, throw up clay pigeons and you shoot at them in the sky, or target practice. Some people love to just target practice. Others are huge collectors. My uncle had an enormous gun collection. I have an enormous gun collection, but not because I collect, but because I have classes. And so when I have classes, I like people using my guns that I know shoot straight and are going to operate. A lot of times when people bring their guns, they're not well maintained. They don't clean them. They're not in good mechanical order, and it becomes a nightmare because you can never really run a class when your guns are all not or dysfunctional. So you bring up a good point, but that's talking about kind of one side of the world. There's a lot of people who are so anti-gun. They truly are. They don't think there's any place for guns in our society. They do not approve of automatic weaponry, of AKs, of M4s, of ARs. These are all all types of semi-automatic rifles. They don't approve of that, and they don't want. There is really that side of the U.S. population, but I think it's surpassed certainly by people who believe in their Second Amendment right to bear arms.
Well, let me ask you the hardest question of this all. What do you think legislators should do in order to fix or improve the situation?
I truly believe probably the biggest reason that we have issues is it's twofold. So let's first talk about people who go in and commit violent acts, school shootings, mass murders. The biggest problem I see is that in almost every instance, it is plotted, it's planned, it's calculated. They announce they're going to do it. They write about it. They tell friends about it. They put it on social media, and yet nothing is done. Either they're not taken seriously, or somebody doesn't want to get involved because it's not their problem, or it's lack effort on that institution. I'll give you an example. The Crumbly matter. This was a 15-year-old kid whose parents bought him a gun for his Christmas present. Then they bought him ammunition. Then they took him to the firing range and taught him how to shoot and actually accompanied him. And they thought this was a good thing. Now, mind you, Ethan Crumbly, the child I'm speaking of, had a lot of issues. He had issues with acceptance. He had issues with basically not feeling like he belonged. And his parents had even bigger issues. They had issues with alcohol. They had premarital, relationships. They had complete instability in the household. They didn't address his mental concerns. He basically told them, I want to kill people. He even wrote it out on his math page for his teachers, his principal, and his parents to see. They all had a meeting just literally minutes before he killed 4 people. And they didn't even check his backpack to see if the gun that his parents had bought him was in that backpack. So to me, it's a total lack of and a breakdown at every level in our U.S. Society, starting with the parents not having safe gun ownership. If you're going to buy a gun, for heaven's sakes, you and only you should have the combination to that safe and that location. Secondly, you've got to have schools that pay attention to the warning signs, that see what's going on and remove a child from school when they are talking about violence, writing about violence, threatening violence. They have no place in our school system. They need to be reported, and they need to get counseling. These are 15-year-olds. And the other problem is not with Ethan Crumbly, because he's been put in, he pled guilty. He said it was nobody's fault but mine, which I kind of disagree with. And he's in prison for life, the rest of his life, even though he screamed out for help. He took 4 lives. But there are so many others that don't take responsibility and that receive very short sentences, and sentences that everybody says, oh, it's a juvenile record, it's sealed. They get out quickly, only to go on and commit more and more gun violence in our society. So we have a breakdown of understanding that. So that's on the one side of things in terms of school shootings and mass shootings. On the other side of things is the gang violence, the cartels, all of the criminal violence we're seeing. And you know what at the root? Drugs.
Of course.
Drugs equal money, and money equals guns. They need guns to protect their assets. They want guns because it makes them look tough and cool, and it's literally what we call street cred, to hold up that gun, that 40 caliber or that 45 Smith, whatever it might be, the Glocks are big amongst gangs, and to show it off. And when you have that money and guns, you'll see the pictures all the time, then you're somebody on the streets. And so until all of that changes, again, starting with the parents and changing everything when it comes to cracking down on gang violence, on gangs, and making it a priority, we're going to continue to see escalation of these atrocities and events.
Well, Jennifer, many thanks for your time and for your very precious and complete explanations. I think that we covered this incredibly complex problem pretty well, and that we touched all the relevant points. So many thanks again for your time and for your explanations.
Absolutely. And I really want to thank your audience just for their time. It's so valued. And it's a credit to you to have followers and people want to listen in. So I truly am humbled, and I thank you for the invitation.
Well, I do recommend everybody, and I remind everybody to subscribe to both our channels, this one that you're watching and also Jennifer's, because you'll find a lot of interesting videos, as she mentioned at the beginning of this interview that we made. Thanks everybody for watching this, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.